Hello once again, you beautiful misfits. Matt here with the 6th of my ongoing Eternal Punishments covering E3 2017, where we come at last to the Nintendo conference. Or the Nintendo E3 2017 Spotlight, to give it its proper name, a pre-recorded presentation streamed online without the need to occupy an entire conference venue, which opens with a montage of people playing their Switches in a variety of exotic locations like railway footbridges, underpasses, airplane hangars, and some sort of underground Splatoon club, where losers are subjected to a 90s kids TV style gunging, before Nintendo of America's Reggie Fils-Aimé emerges into the subdued lighting of a showhouse living room to deliver... Okay, I'm not exactly certain what he was talking about to begin with. It was all some philosophising about how the game is a battle and only winning matters, which all came across a bit like... well, it wouldn't have seemed out of place in this scenario.
If it's not a battle, where's the fun?
Hi, konnichiwa!
It's a test that you pass or a quest that you fail. Fun and battle always locked together. Close your focus and open your mind. The game is a battle.
There was a sly mention of the word Odyssey here, suggesting some more Super Mario Odyssey for us all to gawp at. But we'd have to wait for that, because first up was a further look at some sci-fi anime open world JRPG stuff, courtesy of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but only after Reggie casually reveals the showroom house he'd been standing in was nothing more than an elaborate computer simulation the whole time. Anyhow, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it's the sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles 1, only it's set on a completely different world and features a brand new cast of characters, with the chief protagonists being Rex and Pyra here, Pyra being the lady in red and Rex being the lad with the Yorkshire accent. Something that really threw me off kilter when I first heard it.
We'll show you what me and Pyra are made of.
You see, like many people, I've grown accustomed to hearing dubbed American accents when it comes to JRPG and anime characters, and Japanese games in general. Sure, some villains will have something resembling a quote-unquote British accent, but 9 times out of 10 that's just an American doing their best impression of received pronunciation. So hearing a lad from Sheffield with a massive anime sword squaring up to a Steve Blum sound-alike, it's a wee bit jarring.
You and that sword can't be!
Now, before everyone north of Watford starts gunning for my soft southern head, I am not insulting the accent itself. There's nothing inherently bad or wrong about it whatsoever. And frankly, I think it's brilliant to hear different kinds of accents in video games. It's just, compared to the other voices in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it really sticks out. Most probably because it's the only one consistent with the first game. You see, since it didn't originally have a definite North American release planned, at least not straight away, the first Xenoblade Chronicles was localised by Nintendo of Europe, who went for a decidedly British English approach to the voice casting.
Let's do this. I'm going with you. You'll need someone to drag your corpse on.
In fact, one of the characters, Melia, was voiced by a lady called Jenna Coleman, who later went on to appear in a sci-fi show about a time-travelling alien you might be familiar with. Meanwhile, Xenoblade Chronicles X, a sort of spiritual successor to the first game, was localised directly by Nintendo of America's Treehouse division and localisation company 8-4, hence all the characters in that having American accents. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, however, is also being localised by Nintendo of Europe, so that's likely the only reason the game even has a North Midlands accent in it in the first place, which, as we've established, is entirely fine and consistent for a proper sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles. It's actually everybody else's bog standard stock dubbed anime ones that are out of place. The ideal solution of course would be to redub all of the characters in the game so they all sound like they come from around the Peak District, although given Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is due for release this December, it's probably a bit too late for that. After that came our first look at a new Kirby game for the Switch. Well, it's Kirby, innit? He eats things, gains special abilities and beats the shit out of an angry tree, all while looking adorable. Christ, what do you want? A scholarly thesis on the semiotics of Kirby? It's Kirby! Everyone loves Kirby. Even I love Kirby. He'll be on your Switch sometime next year. Moving on. To Shinya Takahashi, General Manager of Nintendo Software Planning and Development Division, standing in front of a green screen showing Nintendo's HQ. Takahashi-san was here to thank everyone for buying a Switch and mention third-party developers, something Nintendo actually appears to give a shit about this time around, before awkwardly passing things over to Tsunekazu Ishihara of the Pokémon Company to talk about Pokken Tournament Deluxe, a beefed up Switch port of Pokken Tournament, the fighting game with Pokemans, co-developed with Tekken creators Bandai Namco, as well as having spiffier graphics and the convenience of being able to play against your indie band's drummer using just one Switch console. It'll also have new Pokemon for you to mercilessly beat the shit out of, or alternatively, have the shit beaten out of. Has there ever been a phrase in human history with more compulsive power behind it than new Pokemon? I swear, you could point Pokemon fans to a village you want wiped off the map. Tell them the villagers all have rare new Pokemon hidden in their intestines and bam! Instant massacre. That wasn't all Ishihara had to wet the palates of Pokemon's players with, however. He just casually dropped to mention that Game Freak, the primary developers of every Pokemon RPG since the whole idea of Pokemon first popped into Satoshi Tajiri's head, are working on a core RPG Pokemon title for the Switch, quote unquote. It's several years away from release and doesn't even have a name yet, but by this point every Pokemon fan watching the presentation had squeezed themselves into a gleeful coma, so those details wouldn't have mattered anyway. So far this presentation was so very Nintendo, with very little in the way of any real shocks or surprise. Boom! Metroid Prime 4, right out of fucking nowhere. Just when you thought Samus Aran had been consigned to a dusty storeroom in Nintendo HQ, never to see the light of day again beyond fan games like AM2R, Nintendo sorts its shit out and brings her back for not one but two proper Metroid games. The other being Metroid Samus Returns for 3DS, a remake of Metroid 2 Return of Samus on the Game Boy that wasn't actually mentioned in this presentation. Nintendo saved that particular tidbit for its separate E3 Treehouse stream. I'm only mentioning it here because why not share the good news of another Metroid 2 remake? Or should that be another Metroid 2 remake? As for Metroid Prime 4, all Nintendo had to show of that was this title card and a message saying it was now in development. But that alone is probably all Metroid fans need to wash the bad, lingering piss taste of Metroid Other M out of their collective mouth. Excitement levels then fell to a calmer and more sedate level with the first look at a new Yoshi game called simply Yoshi. Instead of a knitted woolly world, however, he's passing through levels that look like something a Blue Peter presenter had made earlier, Little Big Planet style, although Yoshi himself still resembles a plush toy, as do Player 2 Red Yoshi and all of their various enemies. Either way, it's all very sweet and charming looking. I've not really got anything snarky to say about this. Sorry. Look, it just seems nice, okay? Not every game has to be a sodding murdergasm flesh rip orgy of a million dying screams, :origins - blood vengeance of the fucklord. It's not a crime to like a nice fluffy game, you know. Koei Tecmo's Fire Emblem Warriors was up next in what was essentially a glorified cinematic. Blah blah, protection of a sacred dragon, blah blah, chaos and destruction ravage land, blah blah, two siblings set out to save the world, with heroes from other Fire Emblem games. One of them being Marth. I only know who Marth is because A, he says his name in the trailer, and B, people literally died trying to acquire the single amiibo Nintendo ever made of him. You know, the one they placed within a cursed monastery high atop the plateau of Leng, guarded by the living embodiment of madness itself, in the form of a high priest garbed in yellow silk. No, the other monastery. You're thinking of the one full of giant venomous purple spiders where Nintendo hid all their SNES minis. Anyhow, this trailer also had lots of talk about working together, the spirit of teamwork, and other camaraderie horsecock. What it didn't have was anything resembling a single shred of gameplay, but since it's a Warriors game, in the same vein as Dynasty Warriors and Hyrule Warriors, it'll likely involve beating up lots of enemies at once, on some sort of battlefield. It looked nice though. After that, Legend of Zelda series producer Eiji Aonuma stepped up to promote Skyrim of all things. More specifically to reiterate that select Legend of Zelda items like Link's tunic and the Master Sword will be available in the Switch version.
You may have already heard about it during Bethesda's showcase.
Why'd you have to remind me of the Bethesda conference? With that contractually obligated bit of shilling out of the way, Aonuma got down to laying out the nitty-gritty of DLC for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Firstly, there was Trial of the Sword, which looks like the title suggests, a series of trials and other challenges that reward you with a version of the Master Sword that isn't pants. The Hero's Path mode, meanwhile, shows you everywhere you've travelled during your trek through the main game. There's also a bunch of new armour and costumes from Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, the underrated Phantom Hourglass, and the Zelda games with Tingle in them, as well as a Korok mask. All under the umbrella of the Master Trials, or DLC Pack 1, as it's also called, and which you've probably already played since it was released back in June. In other news, I am slow and old. The second DLC pack is called The Champion's Ballad, details for which were a lot more on the vague side. All that's known is it'll add more story content, focused on Link's time with Hyrule's 4 other big heroes, Urbosa, Mipha, Daruk and Rivali, and will be out this holiday season. Aonuma-san's final announcement in this segment was of course more fucking amiibos, based on the aforementioned Hyrulean heroes. After which we return to Reggie and his magical House of Illusions to hear him talk about E3 in general. Reggie also announced the Splatoon 2 World Inkling Invitations, the Pokken Invitational and other tournaments that required you to be physically present at E3 to take part in. Of course, since E3 2017 has been over for months because I woefully overestimated my time and ability to cover it all, me even mentioning this segment is completely and utterly pointless. Similarly, the next segment where Yves Guillemot returned Shigeru Miyamoto's appearance at the Ubisoft conference with an appearance of himself here to talk about Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which is available now and, from what I've been hearing, pretty good. So I might as well head into the segment about Rocket League on Switch, the kind of combination that, when you first hear about it, you immediately think, of course, that absolutely makes complete sense. Although your internal monologue likely doesn't sound as unintentionally sarcastic as mine does. I'm not being sarcastic, for the record. This is one of those combinations like cheese and toast, bacon and eggs, or fish and chips that just sounds correct. You know, Rocket League on the Switch. Just works, you know? Anyway, Switch owners can look forward to playing El Jogo Bonito, as Pele would say, albeit with cars, on the go, out and about this holiday season. As well as exclusive Nintendo themed cars and items for said cars, of course, it will also have local wireless play for playing with other Switch owners and cross-network play with PC and Xbox One players. Isn't that nice? I think that's nice. I think that's just bloody nice. Good on you, Psyonix. You'll notice, however, that I didn't mention PS4 players there. That's because Sony, in their contemptible arrogance, have deemed their system too superior for its players to have any fun with people on other consoles. Which is something I would have expected more from Nintendo, to be perfectly honest, albeit for reasons of sheer incompetence rather than gross hubris. Anyhow, while PC, Xbox One and Switch players are all having fun smashing their balls into the back of each other's nets, PlayStation 4 owners will have to make do with a significantly smaller pool of available opponents. With that, we moved on to the final segment of the show, covering, of course, Super Mario Odyssey, which begins with, a T-Rex wearing Mario's hat. Or rather, wearing Mario himself, sort of. Because as we already know from the initial reveal earlier this year, Mario is able to use his newly enhanced hat to possess a Wait. What? Alright, so capturing, yes Nintendo, I know it's a pun, sounds less sinister than possessing someone, fine. But it's clearly the same thing. Hat lands on victim, Mario teleports into victim, victim takes on visual attribute to the world's most famous plumber, except when Mario teleports into people, he appears to enter a kind of bubbly netherworld. Is that just a visual metaphor for Mario's spectral form tunnelling into his victim's cerebral cortex? Or is Mario sentenced to a timeless bubbly purgatory until such a time as the hat discards its victim and requires Mario to bring it a new one? Who is the real master here? The plumber or the hat? And since everything the hat lands on grows a moustache, is that even really Mario? No, it has to be. We see the hat as it was, a big ghostly top hat, before it lands on Mario, except then we see it take the tattered remains of Mario's old ordinary hat and use them to assume its current form. So did the ghost hat deliberately wreck Mario's old hat in order to take its place? I'm overthinking things again. All I can be sure of with all this is that Peach doesn't exactly seem too traumatised at the prospect of marrying Bowser here. But then she's been captured so many ruddy times already, she's probably eyeballs deep in a tramadol habit by now. Anyhow, as well as reducing frogs, dinosaurs, bullet bills and Goombas to mindless puppety husks, the entity I will now refer to as Mario Hat also can seemingly possess vehicles like rockets and taxis, as well as intangible elemental forces like electricity, all of which looks like it'll be good, mostly clean fun when it's released on October 27th. And with that, the show was instantly over without even a cursory goodbye message from Reggie in his House of Illusion. Just a cut to a black screen with some trademark info, and that's all she wrote, folks. Well, that was refreshingly brief. Time to sum it all up, I guess. Yeah, it was good. You see, Sony, Bethesda, this is the sort of thing you need to do if you don't have much in the way of new stuff to show us. Keep it short and sweet, and don't try to take stuff you've already shown us and spread it out way too thinly. Nintendo did a good job here showing off their main properties while also peppering the mix with a nice balance of third-party titles, even if those third-party titles were, perhaps wisely, tied in some way to Nintendo's first-party titles, like Mario in Rabbids, exclusive Nintendo-themed items in Rocket League, and Zelda gear in Skyrim, for example. Meanwhile, the reveal of a fourth Metroid Prime game was a pleasantly surprising one, since it's nice to know Nintendo isn't letting the franchise rot away into obscurity after Metroid Other M. Although it would have been nice if they'd included Metroid Samus Returns, their new 3DS Metroid, in the main presentation itself, rather than relegating it to a Treehouse stream. In fact, if there was any sort of criticism to level at this presentation, it was the lack of any 3DS games on display. Because for Nintendo's insistence that the Switch is not a replacement for the 3DS and they will continue to support the latter beyond 2018, they did a crap job supporting that message in this presentation. But then why would they? By all accounts, the Switch is selling like the proverbial hotcakes, even with its current modest lineup of available games. In Japan especially, where the 3DS has sold more units than the PS2 ever did, people are still queuing up around the block to buy a Switch whenever stores get more of them in stock. Not forgetting, of course, Nintendo's announcement back in July that they were discontinuing production of the new 3DS worldwide, with only the 2DS and 3DS XL still being made. That, along with the mention of a new core Pokémon RPG currently in development for the Switch, is also surely another nail in the handheld's coffin. All that aside, this was a perfectly enjoyable enough presentation with something for nearly everybody, and which didn't outstay its welcome. It went on for precisely as long as it needed to, covered what it had to, and didn't make me want to gouge my eyes out with pins. All in all, good job Nintendo. So that conference summarised, there's only one more for me to do, my pithy analysis of the Devolver Digital Parody Conference that didn't really hit the mark for me the way it did so many other people. And then after that I'll be free at last to enjoy some upcoming games and not have to talk about poxy cocking E3 anymore. Until next year. You can go now.